everyone, Walter Crosby with Helix Sales Development, your host of Sales and Cigars. Today our episode is with Craig Andrews. Craig runs a marketing practice that really speaks to solving the problem of marketing and sales and making those work together. He helps business owners and salespeople understand how to talk to their ideal prospects, their ideal niche in a way that's going to resonate with them, where you don't have to sell the way that irritates people, right? The way that salespeople have a tendency to get all tense and to get that commission breath, right? Those are things that a lot of salespeople will do, and he's got a different approach to this. It's interesting. Had a lot of fun talking to him. He's got a great story. He's got a special offer for our listeners, so I really encourage you to go sign up for that. It's down in the show notes. So go grab a cocktail, go grab a cigar, strap in for another fun episode of Sales and Cigars. So Craig, I appreciate you taking some time to jump on the podcast with me. So welcome.
Walter, it's a delight to be here. Thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to our conversation.
I love it when somebody brings a cocktail to the party. I've got normally I'm drinking brown, but today I went light with a little vodka and soda. So thanks for partaking. It's earlier in the afternoon for you than in the central time, because you're in Austin, right?
I'm in Austin, yeah. A very cool spring in Austin this year.
Did it snow last week in Austin?
No, it didn't snow, but we've been down in the 60s lately, which is downright chilly for us.
Right, that sucks. I was out this morning and it was 38 degrees at 6:30 in the morning. So I love it when I go to Florida or someplace in the South and people are wearing parkas when it's 60 degrees. But I digress, because my blood is a little thicker up here in Michigan. So let's kind of jump in. There's a bunch of things that I've been excited to kind of talk about. You have a cool approach to how to get people to think about what they're doing and how to relate that to their customers. So let's start with kind of give us your journey of how you got here. I know you got an interesting story. So can you kind of share a little bit about?
Yeah, so in high school, I was not what they would call a model student. And as I was approaching graduation, I realized my GPA wouldn't get me into any university that anybody's ever heard of. Certainly not Michigan, an esteemed school like that. And so went into the Marine Corps for 6 years, which was a blast. Worked with amazing people. And that took me all over the place. It took me to Japan a couple times. And as I was approaching the end of my time in the Marine Corps, I thought, I want to be creative. I want to build things. And so I walked down to a Japanese post office, which is where I was living at the time. And I applied to go to North Carolina State University and become an engineer. Came back, got my bachelor's, got a really cool job, got a design engineering job, which most engineers aren't designers. And I was designing cell phones in the 90s, which should have been cool and exciting, but I was bored. And while I was doing that at Ericsson, I got my master's degree part-time. And by the time I finished my master's, I realized for whatever reason, this is not making me as happy as I hope. I really want to be a little bit more creative. And so I jumped off and I started marketing chips for mobile phones. So I went from designing mobile phones to actually selling the chips, and spent about a little over a decade doing that. And that was a lot of fun. I've visited at the time what was the world's largest mobile phone makers, Nokia, Motorola, Ericsson, Samsung, and Apple. Now there's only two in that group that are left over. But the thing I knew would come, the margin pressure in that industry was so tough. I knew the day was going to come when they would ask me to fly coach to Asia. And I decided when they asked me to fly coach to Asia, I'm done. Because I used to go 4 or 5 times a year. Sure enough, that came, and I thought, I'd done pretty well marketing in that world, drove over $500 million of revenue. And I thought, I will bring my genius to the rest of the world. And it's funny, when I run across my buddies from the semiconductor world these days, and they ask me what I've been up to, I said, I spent the last 10 years learning how little I know about marketing.
That's awesome.
Yeah. It's been an interesting ride. It's exciting. I started off kind of designing circuits to do a particular function, and now it's just, instead of looking at the way physics works, we look at the way the brain works, and we design messages and strategies to kind of program the mind to think in a certain way. And there's some really cool stuff there. If you're at all geeky, it gets supremely fascinating quickly.
The way the mind works, we talked about that a little bit in the green room, where I think there's some great books out there with, persuasion and such that kind of speak to, he's a genius. And that whole thing around how the brain works, how we think, and how we think we feel about something is not exactly, or how the brain tries to protect us, another thing that doesn't make sense. It's really interesting. And what's fun is I talk to a lot of people who are entrepreneurs, and their path is not exactly a straight line from what they started with to where they are today, right? There's lots of zigs and zags that inform the next move. And it's often a similar story where you weren't fulfilled, you weren't happy, I can do this, but it's like, there's something better, there's something more interesting for me, a different challenge, whatever we want to call it. Corporate world marketing and getting down to the core of some of the stuff you're doing, I think that's going to be the interesting part of this conversation. So thank you for sharing all that. Let's start with how do you define a high ticket sale? And let's kind of work our way into that first time offer concept.
Yeah, so high ticket is actually defined by the person writing the check. If it feels high ticket to them, it is high ticket. Duke Ellington used to say, if it sounds good, then it is good. And so for some people, $1,000 feels like high ticket. Other people, it's, you're looking at 5, 6, 7 figures. And so that's, most of where we work is in the 5, 6 figure range. The thing that, especially now as the economy is contracting, or I don't know, I don't want to get into that.
That's a nice way to say it.
Yeah. Well, it drives conservatism. People just start conserving their cash, and they become afraid of making an expenditure. I normally keep a chart behind my desk. It has 188 cognitive biases. I use that to look at problems, and one of the problems that comes out of that is people start to avoid irreversible decisions, people choose not to act. Think about something. If you come to somebody, let's say you have a product that's $10,000 or $100,000 or whatever. It doesn't really matter. High ticket is in the mind of the person writing the check. And they're looking at that and they think, if I spend this money, will it cause me to lose my job? Will I get criticized? Will I get fired because I made a bad choice? Or if you're talking to a business owner, will this be the difference between me winning and failing? And if I make this expenditure, will it ROI for me? Because I can't afford, because of the current climate, I can't afford to not ROI. And so that's the battle you're running into. And when people have that fear, we are primarily driven by fear. It's just an overwhelming force in our lives. And so what you have to do is you have to find a way of battling that fear. You have to overcome that. And what we found is, and here's how we would liken it to for high ticket sales. If I walked into a bar and saw somebody cute on the other side of the bar and went up to them and said, hey, you're kind of cute, may I have your phone number? I've got a few problems on my hands. One, she's probably going to think that's offensive and call the cops. The other problem is I have a wonderful wife who probably wouldn't be real keen on that either. The whole thing is, you're asking for too much too soon. And so when it comes to regular relationships, we know there are things inappropriate, and so we don't do them. But for some strange reason, when it comes to business, we will adopt the same behavior that we would criticize if it was any other relationship. We'll come into a relationship, say, hey, you don't know me, Walter, my name's Craig, I'm going to change your life. All you have to do is sign up for my $10,000 or $100,000 program or a product or service or whatever it is. It's going to change my life. And you're sitting there saying, I don't know you, I don't trust you, and I don't believe you. And so what we believe you need is, it's kind of like a coffee date. If you think about a coffee date when you're dating, you go out on the coffee date because you hope it leads to something bigger, but you're not sure. So you do things to remove the risk. Both parties drive to the coffee date separately. According, what the ladies tell me is they have their girlfriend call in 15 or 20 minutes to see if they need a rescue. So there's all these safeguards that if it doesn't go in the direction you hope it goes, you have a quick and easy exit. Well, we believe that businesses, if you're doing high ticket sales, you should have the equivalent of a coffee date. We call that an irresistible first time offer. And if we break down the traits of it, first, it has to be an impulse purchase. That means the coins in the cushion of your couch, the money in your wallet, or the B2B equivalent of that. And so one way of judging that is if whoever you're selling to has to ask permission of anybody to spend that money, you're charging too much for your first time offer. Because you want to remove that barrier. And just to give you an idea, for B2B, we usually target below $500 because any decision authority at all in an organization can spend $500 without being held accountable. That's the first thing. The second thing is is it has to deliver a disproportionate amount of value to price. We usually aim for 10x the value. So if you're charging $500, we're looking at pack $5,000 of value in there. The next thing is it has to solve a problem. If it doesn't solve a problem, it's not delivering value. And, an audit or an assessment or, all those different things like that, those don't solve problems. Those just highlight the problems that are there. So you actually have to help them solve a problem. You don't want to solve all their problems because obviously you want them to move from this very, very low ticket item to your high ticket core offer. So you want to leave problems unsolved and you want to structure it so it naturally leads to the next step. And what we found is when you do that, and there's a few other things to think about in the process to make those work really well. When you do that, it builds amazing levels of trust in extremely short periods of time. And that's because if you come shoulder to shoulder with anybody and help them solve a problem in their life, they're going to think better of you than they did before you helped them solve that problem.
Is it fair to say that you shouldn't do that for no fee? By having some fee associated with it, there's value associated with what you're offering them? That changes the perspective in the prospect's mind or the customer's mind? Is that part of the thinking or not?
Yes, and you're hitting on two things. I'm going to separate them into two different things. First thing is we are violently opposed to giving people free samples. And you said something, I have the feeling you know and have read Dan Ariely's work. Yeah, so Dan Ariely, if you remember, he did a study with chocolate. He set up a table where he offered you could get a Lindor truffle for 15 cents or a Hershey Kiss for 1 penny. And when those were the choices, I think it was 72% of people chose the Lindor truffle. And then he said, well, let's reduce the price by exactly 1 penny. So the Lindor truffle was 14 cents and the Hershey Kiss was free. And when he presented those choices, it flipped. 69% of people chose the free Hershey Kiss. And so a lot of people walk away from that study and say, okay, if you want to move masses of people, you need to offer it for free, which is a correct understanding of that. But the other thing that I think you have to look at is, and the way I put it is, if you're making your living selling chocolate, your ability to provide for your family is based on how much chocolate you sell. Who are you most likely to sell chocolate to? The 69% of people that said yes to a free Hershey Kiss, or the 31% of people that demonstrated a willingness to pay a premium for value. They say, I know that this Lindor truffle is worth more. It's worth a lot more than 14 cents, but instead of free, I would rather pay 14 cents and have this truffle. That's where I would rather do my prospecting. That's where I'd rather invest my time, because those are the people that have said, given the choice of free, I'd rather pay a little bit more because I see value in what you're doing.
It's the zero-sum game that drives people for the wrong reasons. I need to have everybody in the pool to prospect when you really just want to focus on a smaller niche of the right people who think in the way that you need them to think, or you can access them in that way. So I completely agree with that. I hate free.
Well, and remember I said there's a couple parts of that too. The other thing is Robert Cialdini put out his book Influence, and he broke down all the areas that influence people to make decisions into 6 categories of influence. One of those categories was consistency. And what it says, once somebody behaves or acts a particular way, the probability that they will act that way in the future is greatly increased. And so if you can get somebody to act like a customer once, probability that they will act like a customer again goes up significantly. And so that's another reason why it's good to charge. A third reason I would throw out is we all have tire kickers that show up that will just sit there and waste your time and will never be customers. And charging something filters those folks out quickly.
Those are two powerful, they go beyond authors, they're marketers, people that really understand what goes on in the brain of the consumer, whether it be a B2C or B2B. And you're applying those principles to helping business owners drive how they attack the market isn't the right word, but address the market and address their customers and getting them to think about it in a different way, more strategically, and take away that. Because I see a lot of salespeople that struggle with this transactional mindset. I got to sell them something. And it feels terrible, literally feels terrible when you're on the consumer side of that. Term I've heard used a lot is commission breath. When that becomes evident, you've lost credibility. It just makes everything else harder, and you can't get that back easily.
No, well, and let me take that a step further. Unless you're a bona fide sociopath, when you're trying to sell, your body language changes. You can't control it. One of the things I found and by the way, just so your audience knows, I completely suck at sales. And that's why I had to come up with this is I just can't sell. I've tried all the things. I cannot sell. So I had to change the tables and instead create an environment where people wanted to buy. And what I found is when I put out these first time offers, offers, there's such incredibly good offers that if it's presented to a qualified buyer, they're going to say yes. And so I don't have to sell. I don't even worry about selling. I don't even think about that. My job is simply to sit there and help answer their questions, present the offer, and if they say yes, great. If they say no, we celebrate the no's as much as we do celebrate the yeses.
Alex Ramosi has a phrase where you put together an offer that is so compelling, that fits and solves problems, and it does everything that the individual would be just stupid not to take the option of the offer. And I hate to say stupid, but it's so compelling that they need to move forward because they know they have this issue. It goes past their fear and they start to look at the gain that they can get, which is really powerful in this type of an economy where people are more fearful than they are usually. You have all these austerity programs going on in companies right now, and people are afraid they're just going to lose a job in a general sense. And companies are losing money for a variety of different reasons. So I think that concept is great. Are there any other components there that, business owners, entrepreneurs should be thinking about to help take that pressure away? Because that's what you're doing. You're letting the air out of the room. I've done it in ways where it's like, I'm not sure yet if I can help you. And I'm serious about it. I'm not a BS because I really want to make sure that this person has a big enough problem that I can help with. It's the same principle. Like, you're letting the air out of the pressure out of there. You're trying to figure this out. And then you put this offer in front of them that makes sense logically, emotionally. It's not scary. What else am I missing there?
That's it. We found some elements. There's a couple other elements in structuring it that move people emotionally. We find that it should have a minimum of 3 and a maximum of 5 deliverables. Less than 3 is underwhelming. More than 5 is overwhelming. One of the deliverables should be product of a co-working session where the prospect contributes primarily to the output of that deliverable. And that triggers a couple cognitive biases, the IKEA effect and the endowment effect. But also when it comes to moving forward to the core offer, if they contributed to the deliverables for at least one of the 3 to 5 deliverables and they believe it's their idea, they would have to reject their own idea to not move forward. And that kind of flips the tables. In terms of taking, the other things, so when we present, so we do this in our own business. Been doing this since 2018. And in all honesty, it took me 18 months of fumbling around, started in 2017 on this idea, and my first time offer was a complete failure. Nobody wanted it, nobody understood it, nobody bought it. But after about 18 months of fumbling around, I started getting it dialed in. And then over the last 5 years, I've really been fine-tuning it to perfect it. When we present it, we tell them, we say, hey, look, when you get this, so a lot of times, it's either a marketing plan, or if we see them moving towards winning a first-time offer for themselves, it's some kind of pre-work that actually moves them down the road, that helps them kind of skip. It gets them, I would say that our pre-work with them gets them at least 8 months into my 18-month journey of trying to dial that in, maybe 10 months. But what we tell them at the end, we say, look, when you have these results, you have 3 choices. You can take this and implement it yourself. You can take it to someone else and have them implement it for you. Or 3, if we mutually agree, we'll help you implement it together. And so just like that coffee date, you're taking the commitment risk. Just because you buy this first time offer, we're not asking you to sign up for what follows. As a matter of fact, let me be clear, we're not committing that we're going to follow up with what follows, because you know what? Sometimes you go out on coffee dates. At the end of the coffee date, you say, you know what? I think you're a wonderful person. I don't think we're wonderful together, or I don't think we can help you for whatever reason.
For whatever reason, right. It could be their lack of commitment. It could be they're just not compatible, right? Some people just aren't able to sync up, and there's nothing wrong with that. And nobody should have to change to make that work. You give them those options where they feel comfortable that there's not this hidden hammer that's going to come down on in the next 3 weeks. They got to go do the next thing, where you continue along the same path of, here's another idea that we can step into and try another offer without making them feel like you're selling them. The idea of empathy, I think, is a thread that I've, looking at your stuff, that empathy, I've looked at it as sales is a conversation where there's curiosity from the salesperson. You got to be authentically curious about why and what and how. You need to be somewhat skeptical about some of the things that are being said to you to really help you dig in. You got to be empathetic of their situation. If you have good sales skills, you can't use them as a weapon. Right. You got to really help understand and pull that out and get them to share those ideas. And you're doing that in a way that's probably moves faster and everybody feels really comfortable, because you're not the body language of the salesperson, right? They're not getting all tense and leaning in and getting close and getting their pencil out or pen out to sign on the press hard because you're going to sign on 3 copies. That old BS. So is empathy a big piece of this? Am I off base?
No, absolutely. I would say empathy and I would say service. And let me give you an example. So you and I talked a little bit before, in the green room. Back in 2021, I nearly died from COVID. That's not hyperbole. I spent 3 months in the hospital, 25 days on the ventilator the first time, 5 days the second time. They told my wife for a solid month that I was going to die. Not I may die. They were like, he will die. They had her meeting with hospice to plan the day they're going to pull the plug. 3 days before they put me on the ventilator, I got an email from a lifetime mentor, a guy named Mike Smith. He and his wife, Brenda, have been such important people in my life. They've influenced my life more than anybody other than my own parents. And 3 days before I went on the ventilator, I got an email from Mike saying Kristen, his daughter, died from COVID on the ventilator. And when I woke up, obviously there's a lot of rehab. I had to learn how to walk again. There was a lot. It's been a lot of work, and I got out of the hospital 3 months later on November 6th of 21, and I got an email from Mike's son, Michael, and he said, "Hey, I need some help with marketing." And I said, "Well, Michael, I'm taking the rest of the year off to recover and convalesce." And I said, "Reach out to me later." And I was secretly hoping that would kind of go away because it's such an important relationship. I didn't want to muddle it with business.
Right.
And he came back a second time. I said, "I'm still not ready." And he came back a third time. I said, "Okay, well, let's get on the phone." And when I got on the phone and I listened to him, there were 2 things that were really clear. One was he was very, very lost and he needed direction in marketing. The other thing that was clear was his company's revenue wouldn't support our fees. And so it was very unlikely he would become a client. And in that moment, as I looked at that, the absolute best advice I could give him was to buy our first time offer. And what he got was like a $5,000 marketing plan for about $500. And I knew he wouldn't become a client, but when I looked at that, I was like, this is going to help put you in the right direction. This is going to help you make better decisions in your marketing as you move forward. And maybe you grow to the point where you could be a client. But that's not really the concern. This is going to put you on the right path. And to this day, I can look his dad in the eye and I can say, I took care of your son.
I did the right thing. Yeah. I think that's a missing piece in business. I don't care if B2B, B2C. There's just so much of people don't approach it from the right perspective. And it is, you use the term serving. I look at it as helping. I think they're fundamentally the same direction. And it's there. At my house, we're decided to completely remodel our kitchen. Down to the studs and everything, completely redone. It was amazing how expensive that is to do it the way we want it done. But what was amazing is that we went through 5 or 6 contractor interview and process to go through it. When we got all done, my wife and I looked at each other and it's like there's one person that has been there and seemed like she was trying to help us. Not sell us, but try to help us to get to the right decision. I think it speaks to what you're talking about. She didn't have a formal first-time offer. She didn't have a way to get in, but she really did. She just didn't present it that way. She's the only one who came to the house and asked questions. Like she showed up, sat down at the dining room table with my wife, and it's like, "What do you like about this? What don't you like about this? Why? If you could do it again, what would you try to accomplish?" And she was listening. She was taking note. She ultimately took measurements, and she didn't have her hand out yet. Right? She told us it was going to be expensive. To me, that's why she was hired. Was that she actually listened and made my wife comfortable. And then when my wife pulled me in, because I was like, just figure out who you're comfortable with, and then I'll come in and help. It was crystal clear because of the empathy, because of trying to do the right thing and say things that, potentially would not necessarily make it easier for her to close business, right? She was honest.
Yeah.
That one thing is going to be a problem. And we'll figure it out, but it might not be an easy thing to solve, and which means it'll cost money. She had the experience and all those other things. So I think if you're a business owner, especially if you're a salesperson, that idea of empathy and really engaging with your prospects from a perspective of trying to serve and help takes away that transactional piece.
You know, it's something you said triggered a memory. We look at the sales process as like 5 stages of courtship, you know, introduction, conversation, coffee, dinner, and then commitment. When I first started dating my wife, we're both divorced, just celebrated our 11th anniversary.
Mazel tov.
And when I met her, she had been married to a divisional president of U.S. Food Services. And I was just starting my business at that time. And I was like, I bet you she wants something much different in life than I can provide. And so I invited her over for coffee. That's kind of the theme. And we sat out on my back deck and I said, hey, I need to tell you what's going on in my life. I said, I'm starting a business. The most likely outcome is it's going to fail. If it doesn't fail, in the rare chance it doesn't fail, we will make a modest but livable income. Let's not talk IPO, Bill Gates, none of that stuff. That's so rare. You're not going to get rich getting married to me. And I said, you probably had a different vision for this phase of your life. This was probably the phase that you wanted to travel and do different things. And I just want to tell you where I am. And if this is not a journey that you're up for, now is the time to figure that out. And she tells me, and she tells friends, she says, that was one of the most endearing things that she had ever heard. Because she had other guys sitting there trying to promise the sun, the moon, and the stars. And she felt like I came at it and I was just very honest about where I was, and it built trust.
Honesty, especially when it's not flattering or not exactly great news, or you're thinking it might not be great news, that just gives you complete credibility and opens up that door to trust. And that wasn't, I don't imagine that was an easy thing to say, because if you invited her over for coffee, you were interested in seeing where a relationship might go, but you took the risk of sharing exactly where you were. Probably worked out though if it's been 11 years, right?
Well, and I have one of the rare distinctions where she had the chance to pull the plug and didn't. So you probably don't meet that many people whose spouse had the chance to pull the plug and didn't. She's been amazing. Wonderful, wonderful wife.
I used to make this joke, and then my wife, I thought I was flattery, and then she said, it's not really flattering if you really think about it. Okay, because my line was like, my wife is super smart, way professional, more professional than I am. She has vision. She's got this kind of corporate thing. She's a CPA and auditor, and she's got a successful career. She was a partner at a CPA firm in New York, but we got to question her judgment because she married me. It always gets a laugh because it's somewhat self-deprecating. I never thought about it. She's like, that's not exactly flattering, so you probably should stop saying that. She doesn't listen to this, so I'll probably get away with it. But
my wife tells me to make sure she doesn't regret her choice.
Yeah, I've heard that once or twice myself. And I think occasionally she has regretted it. Because I get that look like, what? Why? Because I'm the guy that, like, if I'm not living on the edge, I'm taking up too much space. That's sort of like how I look at it. And she's like very risk adverse and, conservative about things. It's a good balance, right? Because she pulls me back so that I don't, do something drastically stupid like I have in the past. But, and I pull her the other way. Like, let's do something different. Change it up. Have some strawberry ice cream instead of vanilla all the time. It'll be fun. I'm not sure how we got down that path, but...
Let me throw this out, because while we're on that path, the two biggest changes, or two biggest events that transform my marriage to Karen, my wife. The first was rolling out this first-time offer concept. There was just a lot of tension before I rolled this out, because the success of my business directly impacted her. And sometimes she'd say, hey, do you think you did enough to win that prospect? If I lost one, she's like, do you think you did enough? I'm like, yeah, I think so. And, that created a little bit of tension. Since rolling out this first-time offer, it's amazing. She'll know when I'm on a prospecting call, and she'll say, how did it go? And I said, well, they turned down the first-time offer. And she says, well, they weren't your customer. And just confidence. And so that had a big impact on our relationship. The one that had the bigger impact was nearly dying, and her just working amazingly hard to save my life. And she did. I can point to specific things that if she hadn't been there, I don't think I would be here. It forced us to kind of reevaluate, those stupid little arguments you get in and all those things. You look at those through a different lens when you go through that.
That's really perspective, right? That's what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Putting that, we haven't had the experience that you've had, right? That's unique in yours. But some of us have lost important people in our lives along the way. And sometimes that happens 3 or 4 times in a matter of 5 weeks. It really does force you to look at your spouse and it's like, that's really not that important. and just changes that lens on how we look at things. It's unfortunate that we have to go through something like that to cause that perspective change, but I think it does add value to a relationship. And, if people can go to your site and learn that, and they can call you and try to understand how you can help them, and you'll share that story, but because it's pretty scary, it's pretty compelling. And I know somebody that went through something similar through that same process with COVID, and they didn't come out of the other side of it. And, it's a blessing, and you're taking advantage of it. So that's a positive, amazing thing. So don't let it get away from you. I kind of want to land it there. There's so many things here that I think we could kind of go through. It might be worth having you come back on the program sometime to dive a little deeper into what we talk about. But for somebody that, you said a bunch of things that I think make sense to the audience that it would really compel. And I mentioned this to you before, like when I was reading your material on your website and things, it's like, holy crap, he's talking to me. And I think that's a sign of somebody that knows what they're doing. So if somebody's out there and they're like, hey, I should talk to Craig, what's the best way to get a hold of you, to reach out to you?
Yeah, so come to our website. It's alliesforme.com. That's spelled ALLIES, the number 4, ME.com. And I've got a gift for your audience. We've talked a little bit about this first time offer. Like I said, I spent 18 months just barely getting something working, made a lot of mistakes in the process. So I've put together a guide to help your audience avoid some of the mistakes I made. And not only that, but we have a self-paced course that they can sign up for. We give 23 days access. The reason we do the 23-day limit is we know if we give unlimited access, they'll sign up but not use it. We're in the business of changing lives.
Yeah.
So we put a limit on there, and we see it in the analytics. People actually go in and use it when they have that limit. So the way you get there is you just go to our website, alliesforme.com/sales and cigars. Let me double check that URL.
Yeah, we'll have all of that in the show notes. So that link will be there so people can go grab that. So I would encourage folks to go jump on that offer. I'm going to go take a peek at it myself. I think we'll have it labeled as a free gift for the audience. So that'll be in all of our show notes and our promotion. So be prepared. You're speaking to an audience that could use your help. I have a lot of marketing friends, and I always tease them, like, you're selling smoke and mirrors. And it's hard. It's really hard to sell smoke and mirrors. Because in my world, sales development and getting people to understand that it's, because I don't necessarily believe in sales training in the way that it's presented by my colleagues and associates. I think it's the last freaking thing that we should do. I think there's so many other things that need to be put into place to provide the environment for salespeople to be successful. And, culture is at the top of that list. You mentioned it earlier in a conversation about having people that are quality folks on a team, right? We can't allow mediocrity into our organization. And we got to give people a chance, but everybody makes choices. And I think the very last thing is that you start to train people, but that training can't be like 3 days and everybody's, yay, this is great, and then they forget it. It's got to be an ongoing thing that's implemented consistently and coached. To me, coaching, I had one sales manager in my life that coached, gave me a model. Most salespeople don't have a model of sales managers who challenged your thinking and didn't just give you answers. So that's a long-winded way of saying, get a hold of Craig if you've got some marketing questions. My last question, past or present, does Craig have a relationship with cigars?
Yeah, so in 1994, fall of 94, I went down to Miami for a conference, and I was staying downtown. This is the time when tourists were being shot regularly in Miami. But I ended up going to La Havana a lot. I love getting the little Cuban coffees down there. But one day we got a tour of a cigar rolling business or cigar shop. And it was fascinating to see the whole process and how the key, such a critical element, is having somebody who can look at the different leaves and come up with the perfect blend to make a great cigar. And the thing that they told me, they said, look, it doesn't matter if the tobacco is from Cuba or not. It depends more on the person blending the leaves to pick that perfect blend. And it was fascinating to watch. We bought some cigars, and I actually smoked a little bit. I've got to say, that was the best cigar I've ever tasted in my life. It was just absolutely amazing. I haven't continued the habit, but that was such a neat event just to see what went into making a cigar and the critical elements, the critical ingredients to creating a great cigar.
That's a great perspective, because the blending of it, people don't really think about, but putting those leaves together in a very particular fashion and they get layered in there properly. The whole idea of a cigar, if you really think about when the seed was planted, plant grew, right? You've got different kinds of leaves on the same plant with different strengths to them. They grow in the sun, they're picked, right? They're handled a particular way, they're put in a place for them to dry. That could be a year to 20 years, right? Somebody has to take those, put them together, blend them properly, and then somebody else who has to be really skilled rolls those together. Because if you watch, right, that's not easy to put that together and then put a cap on them. Holy smokes, it's really hard. When you smoke a cigar, there's the level of respect for what happened for that 3 to 5 to 20 years of production is just amazing in my mind. And it's not I used to play golf, and I was a guy that we played with on a regular basis, and he'd always want to bum cigars off of me. And I'm happy to share cigars with somebody who appreciates them. He would have a couple of puffs on it and literally throw it on the ground and then leave it there as he forgot to go after he hit his ball. I'm like, dude, the cigar over there. And he just treated it with no respect, and he stopped getting cigars for me. And then I started bringing really awful ones with him just to give them, just to get them off my pack. So, which isn't very empathetic, but I think it's something to respect, and I know that it's for everybody. But the whole idea, even my wife, when we go to Florida, we'll go to a couple of spots where they roll cigars. And she'll sit there and watch in amazement how these people do this. And they have a husband and wife team that are rolling. And could you imagine sitting there all day long, rolling cigars, talking to your wife, looking at it, like the arguments that they have during the process? It's hilarious. I don't speak Spanish, but you could tell that they were arguing. It was comical. So.
Yeah.
And you've got some good cigar shops down in Austin too. So, and you can still smoke cigars as you walk around Texas without getting in trouble, I think.
Yeah, my regular Friday night hangout, there's usually a couple people smoking cigars. So
I got in trouble for smoking a cigar in Central Park a couple years ago.
I believe that.
As I was walking. So, all right, this was great. I'll have probably reach out to you in a couple of months and see if we can't maybe do this again, because this was fun, entertaining, and educational. So thank you very much. Cheers.
Thank you. It's been a delight.
Enjoy the rest of the wine.